Give everybody a second here to connect to audio. Okay, Ms. Abed, should we go ahead and hit the record button?
Yes, it's going.
Okay, perfect. All right, good evening, everybody. I want to call the Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board April 19th meeting to order. Appreciate all of those who have an opportunity to join us this evening. My name is Tim Mock, Deputy Director for DNR. And we'll go ahead and hold the roll call here. Representative Will. Here. And Representative Benavides will be joining us a little bit later. Representative Exum is still, I think, probably tied up with the legislature as well. Mayor Pro Tem Joseph.
Here.
Commissioner Chimino.
Here.
Hi. Director Redhorse.
Here.
Dr. Way, I believe, was unable to attend this evening. Dr. Limerick.
Present.
Director Barry.
Here.
Mr. Benitez.
Present.
Ms. Nelson, I don't see Terry on yet. And then Dr. Gonzalez.
Here.
And Director Garcia. Hi.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm present.
Good to see everybody. Okay, with that, we've got review and approval of the April agenda. We had to publish the agenda here, and we've got one edit to make, and that is to move the boards and commission training to executive session that we have scheduled later in the meeting. Typically, these boards and commission meetings have some legal conversations and are held within executive session with our Attorney General's office. With that, any further discussion, edits, questions about the agenda? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve as amended?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, now we've got review and approve March meeting summary. Those were sent as part of our board packet. Do we have any discussion regarding the March meeting summary? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
Yes. Limerick, here. Yes.
There you are, Patty. Thank you. A second?
Second.
Okay, I think I heard a couple names, but I caught Mr. Benitez's second there. We've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. Very good. Okay, now moving on here, we have we're going to move on to agenda item number, what's 6 in your agenda there, the proposal for introduction of USBGN case 5054. Before I go any further, Ms. Abed, is Ms. Runyon, was she able to join us this evening?
She's not on the call yet. She did accept the invite, I believe. I can ping her if you'd like me to.
No, that's fine. I do expect Ms. Runyon will be joining us, hopefully, and if so. Oh,
I'm here.
Oh, there you
there
are.
you are.
Oh,
Very
there you
good.
are.
Okay,
Oh, tonight you're JR.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
so Ms. Rangi, I appreciate you joining us. I just wanted to take a moment here as we move into these cases that I wanted to let the board know that you're available. I suspect we'll have some potential questions here as we work our way through these right now.
Sure.
So we are taking up, again, this is proposal introduction USBGN case 5054. This is a proposal to change the current name of VH Pasture Reservoir to proposed name Elk Springs Reservoir. And if you all remember here, we kind of passed some draft process guidance. We're going to test run all of this here. We are in our proposal introduction phase. In that process guidance draft document that it begins on the bottom of page 2, just so you can keep track there of where we are in that document. I do have a question before we get underway with these proposals. I kind of want to sort out. We do allow public comment during this phase of considering proposals. We have a public comment scheduled at the end of the meeting. This works because this is not final approval. However, I'm wondering if it makes sense to entertain public comment on while we are hearing each proposal individually, and then hold the public comment at the end of the meeting for a general public comment. How do we feel about that? Discussion, thoughts, comments?
I can't see any reason not to take your idea there, because while our minds are fresh on the particular project, I have no idea how exactly our neurons are at 5:15 in the afternoon. It's like our chances are better if we have the comments that are relevant to what we have just taken up ourselves. I think that seems better, but I don't know.
I would agree, Jim.
Okay. Any further thoughts? Anybody have feel differently? Hearing none, that's how we will go ahead and proceed. Okay, so what we have here, the proposal to change VH Pasture Reservoir to Elk Springs Reservoir. What we've done on your packet, if you have that open in front of you, we have inserted ourselves in ourselves page numbers for the entire packet up in the right-hand corner. So we will use that page number for this discussion as we flip back and forth and through these pages. So if you don't see that page number, let me know, and we can make sure that we send back around the correct meeting packet. But I think what went out, what we received from Ms. Abad earlier last week, everybody should have those pages numbered accordingly. In this case here, we've got, yes, Councilmember Joseph.
Yes, is it possible to have the pages that you're referring to on the screen so that we all could be on the same page? I do have the packet, but it's still about 80 something pages. So if you could have that section, if it's possible.
Yeah, so if there's no objection, I can, if Ms. Abed, if you can give me screen sharing abilities, I can go ahead and share the screen as we walk through this.
Okay, go ahead and try it, Tim.
Okay, bear with me, everybody. It says disabled participant screen sharing.
It's always a heartbreak. It's happened to me.
Oh, at least I haven't lost internet yet. Snow's flying right now.
Okay, can you try it now, Tim? I'm sorry.
No problem. Yep, there we are. That works perfect. And give me 1 second here. Okay, can everybody see my screen there?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and then Ms. Abad and others, my ability to see all of you right now is limited, so please feel free just to go ahead and speak out if you've got any questions or comments, or if you raise a hand, just a little extra care here to kind of track that with me. Okay, so what we have here for this proposal, case number 5054, is a renaming of a reservoir, 1.3 acres along an unnamed stream, 1.8 miles south of Hotchkiss Reservoir, named for elk, for which the land is managed and conserved. It's located in San Miguel County, Colorado. If we scroll down here a little bit further, on page 6, we've got a little bit of extra information. The proponent is KL Spear from Pacerville, Colorado. The comments along this were that the land was traded from the Forest Service to the proponent in 2014. He's putting the land in a conservation easement with Montezuma Land Conservancy, located in Cortez, Colorado. Habitat restoration is to promote elk and deer use after decades of cattle grazing. Proponent states that VH was a cattleman. It looks like in terms of the preliminary outreach that was done by the BGN, we've heard back from San Miguel County Board of County Commissioners, San Miguel County Historical Commission, and provided some comments to the Board of County Commissioners and the U.S. Forest Service, which has no objection. We've included in your packets there, let's see, we've got a USBGN case brief, including the map. And on page 7 here, we've got a sheet to work from basically for the introduction of the review. A little bit more background here. Let me scroll down. Case brief on page 14 here, if you follow along, again, provides some of the same information that we have. And here is a map showing the location of the reservoirs. And then this is the domestic geographic name report. Again, still same information that we have. Some background information. So with that here, Ms. Runyon, is there anything in particular I should point out regarding this proposal that stands out to you that I have not covered?
Sorry, coming off mute there. No, good job. That's pretty much how we do our meetings too. The staff presents the background information, and the understanding is typically the members have read the docket before the meeting and come more or less prepared to vote. Yeah, the only comment is, again, the county said they had no opinion, Forest Service no objection, and this, as you know, the input of federal agencies is always very important to the BGN. They manage the land, although in this case, I guess they transfer the land to the proponent who wants the change. All I can say is that the board, the BGN has always been very reluctant to change names, especially commemorative names. This VH, this individual, was named for that person. You could consider it an honor. So the question always comes up with a name change like this. By removing the name, is it a dishonor? Or is it merely a reflection of the fact that local usage has evolved? At least this individual is not asking to rename it for himself, which is always good. And again, just the one negative comment, I guess it was the one historical, the county historical commissioner, commission. He simply said it was personal opinion. He preferred not to have the name be changed, but it was only his personal opinion. It was not the recommendation of his historical commission. And again, the county had no opinion. So it's not a whole lot of glowing endorsement, but at the same time, no real objection either. So,
Okay. Thank you. And so what we have here, if we go back into our process guidance with the proposal introduction, first thing that occurs is we state, because the difficulty in contacting everyone who may be familiar with a particular geographic geographic feature, the board relies upon comments submitted by the public. During the proposal introduction, the board will review the outreach conducted by the USBGN and determine if there are others who should be made aware of the name change proposal. Between the proposal introduction and the next stage of the process, the board will solicit written and verbal public comments from those additional groups or individuals. Examples of the groups or individuals to whom the board should consider reaching out to are attached in Appendix A. Under Appendix A, we are interested in hearing from tribal governments, from local entities with a historical focus, counties and or local jurisdictions, appropriate state agencies, including but not limited to Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and appropriate federal agencies. As well as property owners and community organizations with an interest in geographic features as identified by the board, and then individual experts in the field as identified by the board. So now I'm back here on page 8, which is kind of the form for us to follow through this process here. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Runyon regarding any of the outreach? I think one of the first questions I have, Ms. Runyon, was this proposal forwarded on for public input from tribal governments?
Hey, baby.
sorry about that. My mute button's disappearing. Yes, as part of our normal outreach, this particular proposal was on quarterly review list 435. And once the review list is prepared, it goes online, and we would have sent a notice to all 574 federally recognized tribes, and also to the approximately 200 tribal historic preservation officers, asking if they had an opinion. Basically, it says, please review the list of new proposals. If you have any opinions, please respond in 60 days. Otherwise, we'll assume you have no opinion. So that deadline came and went with no response. So as far as the BGN is concerned, we satisfied our requirement for tribal outreach, and there was no response, no opposition, no support, no response at all.
Okay, thank you. Thoughts, board members? What do we think here? Is there any additional outreach that we desire? Any questions, comments for Ms. Runyon?
I do have a question.
Please.
Several questions. I'm looking at the packet as with you as well, following up, and also I did some Google online, and I think I just want to understand from Ms. Runyon some of the comments that she made. Is it your recommendation that the name not be changed, or are you just offering the different sides? Because I looked online, I couldn't find much information about the person's name, to get a sense of who is this person and why is that name and why is it important to that particular body at that time. So I'm sorry, I didn't see that on the packet, or I didn't read that far. So I just wanted to get a little bit more context.
Sure, no, those are great questions. Thank you, Ms. Joseph, appreciate that. No, first of all, the staff doesn't ever make a recommendation to the BGN. We're supposed to be neutral. We simply present the facts, and it's up to the board members to interpret as they see fit what the policies are. I'm just sort of stating for the record, since it is our first proposal here, that obviously the burden is on the proponent of the change to convince you all why the name should be changed, rather than for you or we to have to explain why the current name is what it is or should be retained. In other words, they have to make a compelling case for changing the name. But you have, in this case, a classic example of a conflict between published usage, VH, Pasture, Reservoir. I'll have to check the case brief real quick here and see how long that's been published, versus the policy that says you look for local or present day local support and or usage. So you got a classic conflict here between a longstanding name versus changing the name. There's always a concern that a new property owner might come in, want to change a name, but then what if he were to move away 3, 5, 10 years from now, and the next property owner comes in and wants to change a name again? You know, we want to avoid situations where property owners can change names at a whim. In this case, it sounds like, you know, he acquired the property. In this case, probably VH has long since moved away from the area, probably long since sold the property. He feels there's no, the proponent feels there's no present day connection between that individual and the feature. And for whatever reason, he wants to use the name Elk Springs instead. So if you'll, I don't know if it may well be in the packet, the BGN case brief. It should say in there when or how long the current name has been published. I don't know if Tim, if you can scroll down a little bit for the BGN case brief, or I have it here on my screen too. I can look. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. You're right there.
Page 14.
14. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Page 14?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's the original proposal filled out by the proponent. There's the map. There we go. Okay. So let's take a look at that. Okay. So in the middle section there, names associated with a feature. Yeah, so GNIS, that's our BGN database. VH, Pasture, Reservoir, there's the feature ID. No evidence of local use. That means we couldn't find anything online about this current name. VH, Pasture, Reservoir, looks like it was published in a Forest Service environmental assessment in 2013. And also on USGS topographic maps from 1967 onward. So my guess then would be that the name was found in local use in 1967 when USGS was first surveying the area for the new topographic map. And the way it worked, they typically interviewed local residents, in this case probably ranchers, and said, what do you call the name of that body of water? And they were told it was VH Pasture Reservoir. So I'm just reading a bit further here. Yeah, okay, we even say here, the individual to which VH refers is unknown. There is a VH camp 1.5 miles away, so very close. The proponent was not able to give us any information on who VH was. Presumably he was the owner. It could have been his initials. It could have been a ranch, you know, a cattle stamp, perhaps. But
VH brand, I would guess.
a brand, yeah, that's what I'm thinking, maybe a brand rather than. So certainly, I mean, it's conceivable that with more research, someone could uncover what VH referred to. Was it, like you said, a brand? But the bottom line, this proponent apparently has owned this property at least going on 7 years. Yeah, he acquired it in 2014. Apparently when he moved in, he didn't find any evidence that people called it VH Pasture. Didn't see any compelling need to retain that name and wanted to change it to recognize the elk in being managed in the area. So yeah, not a lot to work with on this one. It's pretty vague. But you know, the bottom line is, you know, local, present day local use and acceptance. So
Patty, you're off mute.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I guess I'm wondering, I'll try to phrase this with more precision and care than I'm thinking it, but I know that we will get some matters of intense feelings, which is, say, controversy.
Right.
And now we are getting our practice run here where there's not much affect at all.
right.
There's sort of a neutral, well, this fellow thinks this should go and nobody can say why it should stay. And
Right.
people are kind of, I guess, the county commissioners seem to be shrugging their shoulders on that. So is this a most excellent opportunity for us to get our trial run by just saying there being no need to be contemplating intense feelings and people who hate elk and people who love elk. I mean, we don't have
Right.
that particular problem going. So I'm wondering if we have been given by you folks, but also by Providence, just a great chance to say, it makes sense just to say yes, because there's no compelling reason to say no. The proponent is kind of a low-key fellow and not really, but maybe that is the joy of this proponent as our first run, is that he is a low-key fellow, and how pleasant to have. There's not that many people who are low-key these days, so it's kind of nice that we could. So I'm just thinking maybe this is an excellent opportunity for us just to say there being no particular reason to think that this will be disturbing to the, I suppose we could look for people who have the initials VH, but that's a research project that I would not assign to a student. So I think we could just say we've been rather fortunate here to get this first run with a kind of tranquil terrain and no particular reason to be navigating with care and caution and forethought here. So what do you think? Am I missing something that is, we should brood, or should we be brood about something? I just can't even see anything that I would brood about if I were to brood. I can brood with the best. I'm good at that. But okay, so
Yeah, so let me see here. One thing I just want to point out is that, you know, right now this is the introductory phase, so I don't know that we need to make any decisions. We certainly want to identify if there's any additional outreach that we need to do, or if this needs the committee, and then we can take it a little bit further. So I think that's kind of what we want to do with this part of the phase there. Now with that, I saw Ms. Joseph off mute first. I'm sorry, Ms. Abed.
We have some hands raised as well, Tim.
Okay, I've got Ms. Joseph, and then Representative Will, and I think Director Redhorse. I want to say, I don't know if you were flagging us down or not, but
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I want to save my comment for a little bit later, so please go ahead with the next person.
Okay, Representative Will.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, and I agree with Dr. Limerick, but my concern here is that if it is a brand, and the historical part of that with the cattleman or the brand that ran on that place, I like the idea that it's conserved, and it's conserved for deer and elk and all that. I totally appreciate that. We're also talking about reservoirs. They're not natural bodies of water, so obviously they were man-made things. So I don't know that it's critical that we rename it. Although I'm not opposed to that either. But I think if the VH was a brand, which it very well could be, because the early brands were two-figure brands, and they were typically just one bar, so you can make it with just a bar. You can do the entire brand. So I tend to think it was probably a brand that was associated with that ranch or whatever. So yeah, that's my comments. The fact it's a reservoir, not a natural body of water, too, makes me tend to stick with the old name.
Okay, and so real quick, I just want to recognize Ms. Nelson for joining us here. Welcome, good to see you. And with that, Director Redhorse.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I do agree that this is our first one, and so it is a great opportunity for us to practice our procedures. And I think in that respect is, you know, practicing what outreach that does need to occur. And, you know, I do appreciate the U.S. I always forget the acronym, and it's right there, U.S. VGN, you know, doing the outreach and sending out the letters to all the 574 federally recognized tribes to see if they have any outreach. But I do feel like it's the responsibility of this committee as well to do the outreach, you know, and definitely because CCI does have that relationship with, you know, the 2 Ute tribes, but then other tribes that have land ties to it. And although that this is not on, you know, any tribal reservation or on the jurisdiction, is that they do have interests to namings of lands across the state. And so how do we include them in our decision making as well? So it'd be my recommendation to outreach to the tribes before.
And can I just clarify, is that back to all the tribes, or is it to our the tribes with the CCIA?
We definitely reached out to the Southern Ute and Ute Mountain Ute tribe, as they do have seats within CCIA, but then I think definitely reaching out to the 46 other contemporary tribes that have lowland ties to Colorado and implementing that just structure and practice, you know, as a terms of our protocol.
Okay. Are there any other hands raised?
Yes, Commissioner Tamino.
Okay, Commissioner Chimino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I really appreciate the comments from Ms. Runyon. It sounds like the advice from someone who's done this for many years, you know, a state and probably the federal government does not want to be changing names. I don't want to use an offensive term, but willy-nilly, just because ownership changes, all kinds of name changes are happening. Is there really a compelling reason? I agree with Professor Limerick. This is nice, you know, this is nice topic to evaluate first. You know, it's really interesting to consider whether, you know, this recommending body might deny many requests that don't meet a certain threshold, and it might be a very kind of convenient and consistent way to implement that by not moving it to the committee stage. But this is a good practice run. We may want to assign it a committee, see if we can learn if VH is Van Horn or who it is, if it's a brand or not. You know, that's all great. But there's also, when it comes to reaching out to the tribes, gosh, we may want to temper are we going to inundate? Are we going to inundate the tribes with request after request after request? Maybe the tribes are fine, and they're fine with being overly coordinated with, but I don't know. This is maybe one I'm fine if we move it to committee, but I'm also think we might want to contemplate. This might be the perfect example of one that we sort of end early in the process. And I appreciate the landowner. It seems like a little better name. It seems like some rationales behind it, especially if no one knows why VH happened, that particular name. And he spent, you know, he went through the proper process. He or she, the owner went through the proper process to go through the BGN. 540 letters were sent out. A lot has happened for us to potentially stop this now. But, you know, at some point you may find examples of things we just, where do we stop them? We're not going to probably just approve every name change request, I wouldn't think, this board. And so this is a good one to kind of learn our processes.
Mayor Pro Tem Joseph.
Thank you. I think from what I'm hearing from Ms. Runyon and also from Member Richard is that part of it, we have a process issue with the constant changes that could happen. If we change a name, let's say we do it now, is the same name going to come back before the board, or the same feature might come back before the board in requesting change from a different owner or just from somebody else. And I think maybe that's something that we might have to look into in a different section. But while we were talking, I quickly went to look for the mandate of our board, or what's our role. So I start thinking, well, is it to ensure that the name are beneficial? Because if it is not, then I think that current request is fine, because it says, I was just looking at the overview that, you know, the Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board is to evaluate proposals concerning name change and new names and name controversies of geographic features. So in a way, as I'm thinking of it, is this person brought, a proposal before us. Our job is not to necessarily think whether it's a good idea or not based on prior use or current use, but to just evaluate it. And I think that, I don't know if that evaluation include benefit, whether it's beneficial. For instance, I know Mr. Indian mentioned present day use. So I just think it should be okay, based on the mandate of our board, it should be okay for us to change that name. But then again, we run into the different process issues.
Okay, that's a good comment. And also want to just draw everybody's, based on that, attention to Appendix B in our process guidance. We lay out that the board will considering the following factors for each proposal. Indigenous names, present day local usage, names that are present local usage are strongly supported by local residents will be noted. Historical significance, family kinship, names that are significant due to family kinship, predominant in the area associated with a geographic feature. Trust lands, proposals made to eliminate existing name problems, and then commemorative names. So just draw that out in terms of some of that additional criteria in which some of the things that we'll be considering as we think about these name proposals. Does anybody else have a hand up?
Director Barry.
Director Barry.
Yes, thanks. I'm wondering, in the application materials, the one member who, or the one person who submitted comments against it was a member of the San Miguel Historical Society who gave some information about it being related to a rancher who was a homesteading rancher. And I wonder, even though the Historical Society or the Historical Commission had no comment one way or the other about the approval of the application, I'm wondering if we can ask them if they can provide information as to verifying the historical significance submitted by Chris Holstrom.
Okay, that's very good. And that's kind of in line with the process that we've laid out here in terms of identifying who else to reach out to.
I also want to make another comment. I almost feel the opposite of Dr. Limerick, where she doesn't see a prevailing reason or not to approve it. I guess I don't see a really great reason to approve it. There isn't a compelling reason to approve it. And one of the criteria that we adopted in our process is there has to be some sort of compelling reason to adopt a name change. If the name has any historical significance at all, changing it to something generic like Elk Springs Reservoir to me is, I don't see that as a compelling reason to make the change.
Okay. And who else do we have, Ms. Abed? Dr. Limerick.
Yes, and I guess my statement was more of a shrug of the shoulders than it was anything else, which is not a particularly illuminating contribution to discussion. But I do feel that we have in Colorado a spectacular public servant, Chris Whitney, who is the brand commissioner, state brand commissioner. And I just put that in the chat that anytime when you can consult Chris Whitney, you're doing making the right move for yourself. So I think he would be a wonderful person to weigh in, not only on if this is the brand, who the VH person was, but also just how the brands represent, if no one can quite remember, or if only one person can remember who VH was, well, that's one thing, but I just would love to hear what Chris Whitney thinks about the meaning of a brand on the landscape, really. So, and because he is one of the best human beings in Colorado, any chance to consult him, I think, is really a good move.
Okay, very good. Ms. Abed, do we have any other hands up?
No.
Miss Runyon, I see you came off mute.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I can't seem to find my hand raise option here, but sorry. Looking through the packet, I guess I need to make an observation too. If you scroll down somewhere to read the feedback from the historical commission member, he actually does provide a fair bit of background on VH. I have the document open here on my desktop, and it looks like it's maybe page 46 or 45, I guess, of your packet. Let's see, this is a letter May 14th, 2019. This is where the gentleman's responding back, and he has some information. He believes VH refers to Hans Van Hagen, a Ridgeway resident who purchased the A.E. Walter property 1906. He says probably a homestead, see warranty deed. The document refers to Van Hagen Dallas Ditch and water rights decreed hereto. I also located a quitclaim deed 2014 to Spear, Colorado LP, that's the proponent. He says, when I contacted the Division 4 Water Office, they indicated that regardless of Forest Service, state, or county name changes, the two reservoirs will remain VH Pasture Reservoir and Verl Reservoir on water rights records. The charge given is to preserve our significant history. Von Hagen and Verl were significant as citizens and settlers of the spring. Anyway, it goes on and on. Anyway, I'm reading out loud. I don't know, I hopped away from the Zoom. So yeah, he gives a compelling argument, I think, that there is a long-standing historical association between this individual and the feature. And he, to me, it's very telling that he says that even if you all and we change the name, the state or the water rights will not be updated to reflect the new name. So right there, you introduce in some confusion. If the name is changed at the state and federal level, and yet the water rights are not updated. And we're well aware that water rights are a big deal in the Western states. So it's really a classic case of a new landowner wanting to erase a name that to him means nothing. But apparently to this historical commissioner, it means something and is a long-standing history, and he speculates what VH refers to. These are tough ones. I mean, you really are going against local landowner preference, and you could argue that he can call it whatever he wants on his own property. The fact is, even if it gets rejected by your board and our board, he can call it Elk Springs Reservoir. He can put a sign up. We're not going to go out there and tell him he can't call it Elk Springs. It just would not be reflected on any state or federal products. And again, right there, you're introducing confusion. So I sort of kind of like the idea of reaching out to the state brand commissioner, but it sounds like we may have the answer already there in the packet on who VH was. But these are the ones that, if you all turn this down, and again, I'm not suggesting either way, but if you turn it down, the proponent won't be happy. But, if you can cite your policy that says we do not erase historical names, and we do say too in our policy that ownership of the land is not necessarily reason enough to name the feature. Usually more than just I own the land, therefore I want to change it. So even though we started off as a fairly quote easy case, this is actually a classic example of the difficulty in considering, especially name changes.
So I think with that, I kind of want to, again, we want to test drive this process. And I know that we as a board want to be both deliberate and very deliberative. And we've got a case that I think we thought perhaps on first blush might be a little bit more simple than others. But I think this is actually a good example for this first phase, this introductory phase, in which we specifically want to look at this and say, do we have enough information? And if not, who should we reach out to so that we can have this kind of a conversation especially during our first consideration phase, in which we then have that conversation about the criteria that we lay out in Appendix B, and then moved on to final consideration. So with that, I think that my preference is to stay along this path to identify, what other information might we want to receive, so that we can then have and advance this greater conversation that we're sort of kind of bleeding into a little bit. So with that said, is there any further discussion? I mean, do we have kind of an agreement on that at least, to test drive that and to at least identify who else we want to reach out to?
I have a comment.
Yes, please.
And I'm making this comment because I'm learning about this with you all as we go along. And I went back and looked at what's the name of this document? The process guidance draft. And I was looking at the local usage. And to me, just looking at that, it says the board will consider the following factors for each proposal: present day local use, names that are in present local usage and are strongly supported by local residents will be noted. Proponents should submit appropriate evidence of local usage and resident support for their proposal. So to me, as I'm reading this and processing everything that is being said today, it seems to me that resident support seems to be the tipping factor. So to me, yes, expert guidance and getting their feedback is important, but nonetheless, to me, it's the resident piece that seems to be the most important for that one.
Okay, and I think we can talk then about how to do that. Perhaps reaching back out to the county commissioners, asking them maybe to reach out to their community, informing them that we will be considering this as part of that, and we seek public input from the locals. Real quick, before I move on to Patty, I've got Director Garcia, you're off mute. I just want to check in with you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I couldn't find the raise your hand option. So very interesting discussion, and I appreciate the comments. What might seem like a softball opportunity, I guess, is now turning to be something a little more challenging. But just on the surface, because it's absent so much of the local community enthusiasm for a name change, including the electeds, I kind of view my role on this board is to look after the interest of local governments in the area or in the region where names are being changed. And since the county commissioners of San Miguel really are frankly indifferent, that's my view of their statement, it's not a big issue. At least that's what I'm reading, at least from an elected perspective. Most local proponents would channel their concerns through their local elected body, and that hasn't occurred, but maybe it's because there hasn't been enough information about this change. And then the other point that actually was just made by Council Member Joseph about the historical connection. I guess if I had to err on one side or another relative to local community, local jurisdiction, local electeds, local folks living in this area, it seems to me that part of what this body should be considering is also preserving history if there's not a compelling reason not to. And there's nothing dishonorable that I know of about the name VH Pasture. It doesn't appear to be controversial, doesn't appear to be racist, it doesn't appear to be something that is off the rails, so to speak. But it would seem to me that the historical factors probably should be something that we should probably weigh more heavily, absent strong enthusiasm or proponents to make the name change. And I just wanted to make those comments.
Yep, thanks. And so then let me lay this out here. I've got, I'm going to go to Ms. Nelson, then I've got Director Barry, Rep. Will, and then Dr. Limerick scheduled right here on the, in that order. So Ms. Nelson.
Okay. Being a historian and one who's in the throes of maintaining names of locations that are proper but not offensive to anyone or any culture, I would err on the side of the community, exposing them to this process and keeping the name that they suggest. I think it's more appropriate for the community overall to have that historical significance pointed out and kept. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Director Barry.
I'm sorry, I probably just forgot to take my hand down. I didn't have the additional comments.
Okay. That's fine. Representative Will.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I just think when you look into, especially with the water right concern, if that's a decreed water right and that's the name on the decreed water right for the reservoir, I think that's pretty compelling. Stick with the name. It's currently on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And then Dr. Limerick.
I'm quite happy to retreat from my opening. Anyway, so I think it was provocative and an interesting way to start. But I also just wonder if there is a mechanism for getting more local voices, because I've certainly with Mr. Garcia, with all sorts of people, I'm with the, well, what is the community thinking? Well, now we have the property owner and we have the person who did the research, and thank you for pointing that out to us. That was great to have that brought to our attention. But I just was, is there any mechanism, and maybe the, maybe someone knows what that is, for saying to a community, do you care? And one reason I'm wanting to make this point is that I suspect hardly anybody, well, I'm going to say San Miguel County, people are always involved in everything in San Miguel County. So they're builders me, because it seems like they get involved in mushrooms. I mean, you name it, they are really having festivals and all kinds of things. So there's silence. I don't know what to make. I mean, how could I possibly know what to make of it? But is there any mechanism for a board like this to put a little question, letter to the editor or something that says, what are you all thinking? So, and the reason why I like that idea is that I'm completely in agreement with everyone here who's speaking on the behalf of keeping history on people's minds. But I doubt right now that VH is on more than 3 or 4 people's minds. So how do we, is there a mechanism for saying, what are you all thinking, and do you care, and not why are you so quiet, but let's hear from you. So, and maybe there is no such mechanism, but I'm just wondering, is it anything that these kinds of boards can write a letter to an editor or ask for a tiny public service ad or something that says, who are you out there and what are you thinking?
Okay. Ms. Runyon.
Thank you so much. Yeah, excellent points being raised here, and I guess I'll segue directly after Dr. Limerick's comment there. It is a real challenge. In an ideal world, yes, we would go out there in person, we would knock on doors, we would, I don't know, stand at the grocery store on Saturday morning with a petition and ask for opinions. We don't have the luxury with a staff of 2 to do any more outreach than simply contacting the county government. The BGN's attitude has always been that the county government is elected to speak for all of its citizens, and how the county government comes up with its recommendation is really up to them. Some will choose to have a public hearing, some will put a notice, certainly in the paper perhaps, some will reach out to local property owners. Others will simply take a look at the proposal, and to be honest, we're even lucky to get a no opinion response, because unfortunately, more often than not, it's, we send a letter to the county government, we hear nothing, and then we send a follow-up, and the second communication basically says, if we don't hear from you by so-and-so date, we'll assume you have no opinion. And our board wrangles with the very same questions about, well, what do the local people think? And we just don't have the resources to find out So certainly, obviously your board is welcome to do additional outreach to try and encourage the county to get local opinion. The idea of posting something in the letter to the editor is always a good way to get outcome or input, I should say. There's a few states that do it that way, that will post something in the paper. Not many, just a handful, if that. Might be worth exploring. And the fact that you are a new board, it might not be a bad initial approach to feel it out in a case like this and introduce yourselves. And as time goes on, you'll be interacting with San Miguel County, again and again over the years. Introduce yourselves right now and explain you've got this new process, these new members, a new guidance document, and you really are wrangling with this one and could use some local guidance. So there's certainly no harm in reaching out in any way you see fit. If you have the resources to do that, we certainly appreciate the fact that you take the extra effort to get more local input, by all means. My second comment relates to this case brief that you're seeing there on the screen right now. You probably may or may not recall from my initial presentation to you all back in the fall that the quarterly review list and the case brief that you see here is essentially a static document. This is a summary of the material that we had at our fingertips at the time the case brief was prepared. So all the feedback since then, the county's no opinion, the comments from the historical commissioner, and so forth, the lack of response from the tribal governments, that all comes after the fact, after that review list is posted. We never update this case brief. So it's really critical that you all, and you've done exactly that here, you've compiled a packet with all the material. It is a lot to take in. So when you see on here, when we've said in our comments, the identity of VH is unknown, well, now it is probably known. The commissioner found a lot more information. We can presume that VH was in fact the individual that he mentioned, but that never gets updated here. It will get updated into the final docket that we present to our US BGN members after you all have commented, provided a recommendation. So it is critical that, as cumbersome as it may be, you need to read all this material, keeping in mind, again, this document here is the initial BGN staff's findings. Everything else below this in the packet came later. So this is why it's good to have that one research page where you check, who was contacted, what they said, and you can weigh all the evidence there. So I'm just kind of guiding you to keep in mind that this is a much bigger packet than what you see in this case brief just there alone.
Okay,
that makes sense.
Thank you. Yes. Dr. Gonzalez.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. I just wanted to say that I really support what Patty suggested. Maybe posting something like she said in the newspaper or the newsletter of the Historical Society, at least giving it a shot on this first one. And then I have a question for us. When we're considering a name change of somebody that is a commemorative name after an individual, how do we evaluate character or behavior? And do we want to know more about Mr. VH and how he conducted himself? Or maybe we will never know, maybe we'll never be able to know, but it might be helpful for us to think about that because I think that's something that we'll encounter in the future. So how do we evaluate character?
Okay, thank you. Ms. Abed, is there anybody else with a hand raised?
No, Tim.
Okay, so I have pulled us back to this document here that is our introduction for review. And again, we kind of, this is a test run. This is our first consideration here. I do like some of the ideas proposed, and I think we want to go through the steps because we're going to have much more perhaps passionate conversations or proposals down the road. And so making sure that we take some of these steps here. I really liked the op-ed as well. Writing that to the local newspaper to seek additional local input. We can test run that and see what kind of feedback we might get. That might be a strategy we want to implement, but also it certainly helps us draw awareness to our work here. So back to this document here, as we work to fill this out and I identify the additional outreach. I have been making some notes here that we want we've identified some additional outreach to tribes, the Historical Society, Chris Whitney, the brand commissioner. I would include Division of Water Resources, since we do have a water rights issue here. It's also a reservoir storage vessel. Perhaps Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and then also seeking some additional local input. I think that op-ed is certainly an interesting idea. I would like to do that. We can submit that perhaps as a board in some respects, and we can talk about that. I don't know if there's any other ideas in terms of generating some additional local input that we ought to try and seek. And then help me out here if I've missed anything from that list or considerations or anything that's already been said. Mayor Pro Tem Joseph.
Thank you. As you were talking, I don't know how user-friendly our website is. I like all the proposals and doing the outreach. It will inform the public, but the feedback coming back the other way from the public to us, I'm wondering if we could do something maybe on our own website, some type of a survey, yes, no, something very simple. That might be useful to get feedback from, the name, to get feedback from the community about the name change. And I guess this is a process question as well. And I'm not sure how that would work, but I wonder, do we have a forum where people can send in emails and we all get it? Because I know in council, that's something that we have. People can just submit a email to council and we all get to see it. So I know we've mentioned that before. I think I've heard that on our previous board meetings, and I'm not sure if that was a bad idea at the time, but I think that might be helpful to get some of the feedback coming back the other way, because putting out an op-ed is a wonderful idea, but we may not essentially get close the feedback loop, basically.
So that's a very good point. And along those lines, we have been, and Ms. Abet actually worked up a online comment section that we will implement if we haven't put it up there quite yet. I'm going to look at Mr. Aaron, our communications director, or Ms. Abet if we put that up there. We can share that around, but that would be a link directly to submit public comment, and it identifies the case, the comment, where that individual may reside, those type of things onto the website. Commissioner Chimino, I see you're off mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So are we saying as this board that 100% of the requested name changes will go through this full process? Or, because I was under the impression that we might have a few cases where we don't even go through this. It doesn't meet that threshold to even go through this, committee, stewards. So that's my question is, are we gonna do this on everyone, or is that a thing where we could just stop some very early in the process?
So I'm gonna give you probably my answer, my opinion is that we wanted to test run a handful of these, working it through this draft process, and before we really finalize that. So that's a question kind of going through a handful of these that I think we then come back and take a look at. And I'm already thinking about, moving something from the first, so the only vote we actually take that's outlined right now in that draft document is at the final consideration stage. So these things move forward basically as we identify the additional outreach right now in the introduction phase. So we may want to add something in there. I think that's a conversation that we should certainly entertain after we've kind of gone through this a little bit and test drove it.
Jennifer Runyon has her hand raised.
Ms. Runyon.
Thank you again. Yeah, to answer that question, because all these proposals right now on the pending list came to the BGN, yes, we would like a recommendation on each one of these from the Colorado board. Now, having said that, it could be a recommendation is we have no opinion. We do not see a compelling need to get into the weeds of this proposal. We don't see any argument to do any more outreach. We don't see that this has any merit, but any proposal that comes to the BGN must ultimately be voted on by the BGN. So if you choose not to have an opinion or not to consider it, that is part of the packet that goes forward to our BGN, and they will vote. And when it comes down to it, it'll, just like you're seeing here, county has no opinion. The statement from the Colorado board would be, Colorado board has no opinion. So this is one of the consequences, I guess, of deferring the entire process to the BGN level and having you entertain proposals that have come to us first. There are some states that, because they're much more publicized and they have a process, that they will accept proposals directly from the public or whoever, and they will decide if they reject a proposal, we never see it. Or if they decide a proposal doesn't have any merit, we will never see it. But by virtue of it coming to the BGN first, we would like to have state input. So to answer your question, unfortunately, yes, we would like you to evaluate every proposal, at least for now, while they've all come to us first. And then if that helps at all.
And so also back to Junie's comment there about the submittal, my preference, I think right now, is that all of the comments, we also have a specific email address also, and then they can mail comments in, is that it all goes to Miss Abad first, and then she can put it into a packet so that we all can operate off of one consistent document rather than trying to sort through our emails to keep all of that separate. Or separate it all out, I think makes a lot of sense. You can think about when we get a couple of these going, the number of direct emails coming in and out on all the proposals. I think that'll help us kind of keep it all consolidated in one place for each proposal.
Yeah,
and Ms. Abad can help us out with that.
Wait till Mount Evans starts to become high profile. I mean, you think this is agonizing. Wait till you get to Mount Evans and a couple other prominent features, Gore Range. This is a relatively minor case. One thing I would say too, sorry to interrupt there, I should have raised my hand, I'm sorry. My thought too about posting all the public comments at your website, you might need some guidance from Ms. Beatty on whether you're allowed to post public comments on a public facing website. We know on the one hand it's a public process, and obviously you're all in favor of transparency, but we are getting dinged big time for what we call PII, personally identifiable information. We have had to disable a lot of our documentation on our website because it includes home addresses, emails, names, and the nature of this business, you're going to have commemorative names for people where proponent will submit a birth and death record. They may even submit their tax documents. They may even submit social security numbers. Why someone would do that is beyond me, but they do. It puts a lot of burden on you all as the staff to ensure that you're not sharing information publicly that could get you in trouble, because if you all can see all the comments on the website, so can everyone else. And you don't necessarily want a proponent reaching out to someone who's opposed and getting into this personal back and forth. You're going to get caught in the middle. So you definitely might want some guidance from Ms. Beatty on what you can and cannot post on the website. So just
Ms. Nelson, I see you're off mute. I just want to check in and see if you had any additional comments.
I don't. It's very reasonable, the things that I hear that we're doing, because we understand about public information going the wrong way for you. So that would be a very big concern for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Ms. Abad, do I have any other hands raised?
No, Tim.
Okay. So to review here, in terms of the additional outreach to the tribes, the Historical Society, the Brand Commissioner, DWR, CPW, and op-ed trying to reach the locals, do we have any other outreach that we would like conducted for further input regarding this matter? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and work on getting that outreach. Give me a second here and let me find my place here. Also then, as part of this, we will identify the next steps for the name change proposal, and then including but not limited to considering whether the nomination of a board member as the steward of the name change proposal is warranted to assist in moving the proposal through the board process, or considering whether a committee/task force should be created pursuant to the bylaws, Article 7, to assist the proposal moving forward. The board will consider whether substantial interest exists from tribal governments and other tribal communities to create a proposal committee to perform additional outreach to tribes. Thoughts? Do we want a board steward or a board committee? Does somebody want to volunteer? Would you like us to work with our very limited staff? And think as these kind of get rolling here, we're going to need some teamwork here to pull this all together. So just looking, I think we may be able to try and take a shot at this, but also may need to enlist your help at some point.
Representative Will has his hand raised, Tim.
Representative Will.
Yeah, Tim, I'd reach out to the water resources for you, or CPW if you want.
Okay. So we've got Representative Will will do some additional outreach, and I think Representative Will, we can also work with Miss Abad to kind of assist with directing some of that communications, how that might look. I'm sorry, Dr. Limerick, you are off mute.
Yes, I would be happy to contact Chris Whitney, but I would be stealing that pleasure from someone who doesn't know him. So happy to be selfish. Nothing.
If there's anybody that would like the brand commissioner, otherwise Dr. Limerick can.
Being greedy, but if anyone disputes this, I would. So he is really a wonderful person to talk to. So, but I'd be happy to just claim that for myself. So.
Okay, Director Barry, I see you're off mute.
Yeah, since I suggested it, I'd be happy to reach out to the Historical Commission.
Okay. I'll tell you what, I will be happy to work on an op-ed from the board here and submit that to the local outlets, if that's fine. We can probably find a process in which we draft something up and have Miss Abad share it around for some additional edits, unless there's anyone that wanted to take that on in particular. Okay. And then Director Redhorse, can I call on you in terms of the appropriate way to reach out to the tribes?
Yes, I was just about to unmute myself. I can definitely take the lead on reaching out, making that outreach to the tribes.
Okay, perfect. So from the list that I had read off here, it looks like, give me a second. It looks like we've got a committee then. We've decided on a committee that consists of Director Redhorse, Director Barry, Dr. Limerick, Representative Will, and myself. And then some additional support from Ms. Abad and Chris Aaron in that part of the process. How does that sound to everybody? Thumbs up? Questions, comments, concerns, any additional input? Okay, perfect. We will then go ahead and proceed and collect that additional outreach and then move this on to the first consideration at a meeting in the future when we get this information compiled by the committee. All right, with that, how are we doing? We can continue to push through here or do we want to break?
Maybe just a couple minutes.
Okay, let's take a quick break. It is, I've got 6:23 on my clock here. How about we'll take 5-7 minutes to 6:30? Does that work for everybody? Okay, we will do that. 6:30, we will come back in. Thank you. Okay, I've got 6:30 here. And we will carry on. So I really appreciate that conversation. I actually thought it was a very good conversation, especially for doing something entirely new here. So appreciate the teamwork working through that. We've got a couple more items here on the agenda. Next, we want to take up for the proposal introduction, BGN case 5057. I'm on page 10 here of the packet. And this is to, the proposal is to change the current name of Verl Reservoir to the proposed name of Wapiti Reservoir. Also located in San Miguel County. This is also introduced by the same individual, K.L. Spear from Placerville, Colorado. And very similar to the last proposal that we had just heard. This was land traded from the Forest Service to the proponent in 2014, is putting it in a conservation easement. And habitat restoration promote elk and deer use after decades of cattle grazing. The proponent states that Verl was a cattleman. Also in here it says Wapiti is from the Shawnee, also Cree word for elk, meaning white rump. Again, this reservoir here is 0.25 acres. Again, along an unnamed stream, 2.3 miles south-southeast of Hotchkiss Reservoir. Again, we had some preliminary comments or outreach done by the BGN. San Miguel County Commissioners did have a San Miguel County Historical Commission member provide some comments. And then U.S. Forest Service has no objection. So coming here to the same document, this is located in the same area, same region, very similar here. So I'm going to go out on a limb, and I wonder if we ought to, when we do the outreach, this is the same outreach that we just got done with this proposal. And when we do that outreach, we can go ahead and we'll have, we'll mention both of these proposals in our outreach and seek comment. What do we think about that? Commissioner Chimino, I see you're off mute there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I think that's probably fine. This is, from what I could tell, it's the same petitioner, same landowner of both of these features. And so I probably should have said these things in the last topic, but I failed to cover all the notes. And so I just want to say a few more things, but I think your suggestion is spot on. We already resolved the committee for the last one. They're next to each other, probably similar contacts and maybe similar water rights. But anyway, when it comes to local use, I just want to highlight that, and this might be a question for Ms. Runyon, please. For the Colorado Board of Geographic Names Advisory Panel, we kept saying local use, and it appears that the petitioner highlights that the bodies of water are no longer used for cattle, they're used for nature. You know, it says elk, and I assume deer and lots of other nature. But for our board, under Appendix B, we say present day local usage, only name usage, not actual usage. If we want to change that later, we could do that. And maybe I'm missing it. If it's later, other places of our document is actual usage, I'll take it back. But Ms. Runyon, when it comes to usage, does the Board of Geographic Names talk about name usage or actual feature usage?
That's an excellent question. No, it really is focused on name usage. And in this case, there's really no name usage of the proposed name. The proponent, as far as we can tell, has not started calling it that. Sometimes we have cases where they wait until the new name is in local use before submitting their petition. But best as I can tell, this individual is not currently using the name. Yeah, as far as use of the feature, you know, most features you're dealing with, you know, mountains and streams and valleys, the usage is never going to change per se. And the comment you made earlier about this being a reservoir as opposed to a natural lake is a very valid point. The BGN over the years, we've talked whether it's appropriate to separate natural lakes from reservoirs as they are man-made. But the reality is it's so hard to really differentiate one from the other. And so many natural lakes over time, maybe they become impounded. In a case like this, perhaps in maybe a more rural or dry area, the property owner will build a small dam or a small impoundment or a berm, which by definition makes it a reservoir. We simply don't have the resources to analyze what's a natural lake versus a natural lake that became a reservoir, as opposed to a reservoir that was formed as a reservoir. So we made the decision years ago to essentially lump lakes and reservoirs into the same review process. So yes, it certainly raises the question. I mean, this really is a pond. I mean, I think it's an acre and a half. I mean, it's small, it's rural. You're right, the proponent, part of his argument might well be that it's no longer used for water storage for a traditional reservoir that it was built for. Maybe it is now simply a pond that wildlife visit and the whole conservation thing. So, that could be a compelling argument to change the name, the fact that the original intent has evolved over time, the use of the feature itself. It's a very valid question. It's not something we typically wrangle with because, again, other than reservoirs, it doesn't really come up. You're not going to talk about usage of a mountain. A mountain is what a mountain is. But yeah, it's certainly worth, considering. And I mean, the fact is, he could fill it in tomorrow and it becomes historical. Doesn't matter what it's named at that point. So certainly the water rights usage, the documentation for water rights is definitely worth looking into. So I think that's a very valid, and we used to have a policy directly for water rights, basically saying a name that's in a water rights document can never be changed because of the legal implications to that. And over time we were told, no, it's really irrelevant, that these days with digital files, you can cross-reference an old name with a new name, and having it be in a water right is not an issue. But it certainly could be a factor for you Western states. Water rights could be the deciding factor. So these are all good questions that you all were going to have to find answers to. So yeah, thank you for raising that and giving me a chance to explain lakes and reservoirs. As far as we're concerned, they're all under the BGN's purview. Now, the dam that forms a reservoir is different. That's a man-made entity. We do not vote on dam names. In this case, I don't believe either one of these has a dam associated with it. I have to double check that. But if a dam is renamed, that's between the owner and the state dam safety office, which would then forward it to the US Corps of Engineers, which manages a national inventory of dams, and we would simply update our database. So that's another twist when it comes to reservoirs, is that the dam name and the reservoir name may not necessarily be in sync, but they're handled completely different processes. So I know this was supposed to be a simple case, wasn't it? And now all these new twists are coming out, but hey, good practice, right?
Okay. Ms. Nelson, I see you're off mute.
I'm agreeing.
Okay, very good. Any other comments, concerns with proceeding how we've laid out and carrying these two together in terms of that outreach? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and do so. Okay, now let me find the agenda here. And of course, I skipped over public comment in both cases, so my apologies here. We are at the public comment phase of the agenda, so we will open that up to both of these proposals as well. If there is any public comment, would you please raise your hand, and Ms. Abed, if you could help me identify anybody that may be raising their hand.
Tim, we have Tim Swales.
Mr. Swales, welcome back. Appreciate you joining us. Public comment, please proceed.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, thanks for giving me a chance for public comment. This is more just a general one, not necessarily kind of to do with any of these two. Yeah, my general public comment was just, yeah, that just wanted to voice my support for changing the name from Mount Evans to Mount Blue Sky. And I did a bit of groundwork. I created a SurveyMonkey poll online, got it out to friends and family, and it wasn't a ton of people, but there was at least 15 people who did it and said they are down too. I also looked on change.org, and there's 4 petitions there at the moment, and kind of combined, they have about 3,800 signatures. So I think there is some kind of, ground support for that change, and I just wanted to voice my support for it. And thanks very much for giving me the opportunity.
Great. Thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening. Ms. Abed, is there any further public comment?
No, Tim.
Okay. With that, we will close public comment. Okay. Next, we are scheduled to go into executive session and have this board training. A.G. Beatty, if you could help us out here. I do want to be mindful of the time tonight, and we've got roughly 20 minutes remaining before 7.
I have a proposal.
What's that?
I have a proposal.
Okay.
I know that we spoke about 10 minutes ago, but I may be modifying what I had shared with you about my ability to get through things. And I'm wondering if we don't want to take the board training and put it in sort of a board workshop format where we meet at 8 a.m. It is a single subject. We meet, I take us into executive session using the script and the magic language. We have an opportunity to really have a discussion about the things that I need to train the board on that isn't compressed by the board's other agenda items. And we can just do the board training and give it the sort of room and space that I think it deserves.
Yeah, so I think we were sharing the same wavelength here. I really do appreciate, I mean this is a compliment, that this board is very engaged, and I suspect that we will have some conversation. So I certainly couldn't promise that we would get out of here by 7 p.m., but I think that makes a lot of sense to separate that out by itself and give it that space. Ms. Beatty, do you have any further follow-up? Okay, board members, how do we feel about that? We will reschedule the board training to another time and date. Thumbs up? Thumbs down? Okay, I think we've got the direction we need to go, so we will go ahead and do that. And
that means agenda items 9 and 10, we're just fast forwarding through.
Yes, agenda items 9 and 10, we will carry on another date and time. And so we will work with all of you to schedule that. Before we adjourn, is there any further comments, questions, discussion for the good of the matter today? Cool. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion. Motion and a second. Very good. Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Great. I really appreciate all of you. Ms. Runyon, I know it's 9 o'clock where you are. Thank you very much for hanging in there and your support of this board as we've stood this up. We really appreciate it. We will see everybody later. And Ms. Abed will be reaching back out with a follow-up doodle poll for scheduling the next meeting. Cool. With that, we stand adjourned. Thank you. Good evening.